anything changed since you defended Mohamedou Ould Slahi, and what actions can be taken on behalf of the men still held at Guantanamo?
The actions that can be taken is to tell your congresspeople, your senators and representatives, to continue to put pressure on President Biden and his people. And if you know anyone close to President Biden, anyone in his cabinet, anyone who you can bend their ear, tell them it has to close, and it can close. There have already been letters written by congressmen, congresswomen, and that's what we have to do. We have to keep the pressure on. And the other question was, has anything changed? Guantanamo keeps getting worse, frankly. I haven't been there since 2016, since Mohamedou got out. But every time I went, and I went lots and lots of times, several times a year starting in 2005, it always got a little worse. There was a little more control. You know, in some ways, they finally let the habeas lawyers who were on one side of the island free range, as we said. We could actually stay and have dinner on the other side. That was kind of the only good thing that happened. But it just gets more controlled. The commander, the latest commander, has only brought things down harder. You know, and I mean, it's a ridiculous place. Mohamedou's shoes wore out, and I went to the next to get him a pair of shoes. And I came in, and the guy at the jag at the front said, he can't have shoes with laces. I said, he's wearing shoes with laces. He can't have shoes with laces. He's wearing shoes with laces. He can't have shoes with laces. I said, call the sergeant out there. I can't call her. I said, of course you can call her. What do you, I mean, this is a prison. You all can communicate with each other. Finally, he calls her. He gets to go in with the shoes with laces. I sent a letter. I mean, I sent pictures. He was allowed to have pictures of his attorneys and his family, but the picture of me got lost. So I go out after I've seen him to see the young JAG kid. I mean, they're really young. And I said, where's this photo? Oh, I don't know, must have gotten lost. I said, this is my client's property. It can't just get lost. You have to find it. You're responsible for his property. Well, I don't know where it is. I said, well, I'll tell you what. You find it by tomorrow morning, or I'm going to call the FBI and let them investigate why it is that someone is perhaps stealing my client's property. The next day it showed up. But that's what you have to put up with in Guantanamo, just the minor things that matter to them. I used to be able to bring food in, and Mohamedou and I could eat together. Now you can't bring any food to your clients. No reason. We used to stop at the McDonald's and bring them food. It was a treat for them. No reason, can't do it. Sanitary reasons. I mean, you know, it just keeps getting worse, but we have to close it.
After the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan and Jake Sullivan and Blinken focus now on China, how would it affect the Philippines with the United States continuing to support the regime there? Shouldn't that be paid more attention to?
Well, sure. I mean, one of the interesting things about the war on terror, as you know, they used to call it, is in some ways it's always overlapped with a broader interest among the war industry and among the military class and military brass, I should say, to pivot to great power competition. That's what they call it, GPC. It's actually more profitable to make big weapons for cold wars that might turn hot and destroy the species. That's always been true. Then, you know, the weapons for counterinsurgency. I mean, forever war is profitable. Nation building may not have worked in Afghanistan, but it sure as heck worked in the counties of Northern Virginia, where the war industry executives lived, and they literally nation built extensions on their houses. So that is true, that it is profitable, but making tanks and making F-35s and destroyers and nuclear weapons, that's always been profitable. And the military has always liked the idea of those wars. This happened after Vietnam too. It's actually really hard to win a counterinsurgency. I mean, they almost never work. I mean, for a lot of reasons. I mean, it's really, people don't like being invaded. I mean, my soldiers used to say to me, oh, I hate the Iraqi insurgents so much. I hate the Taliban so much. And I'd say, did you like the movie Red Dawn, though? And they would say, yeah, sure did. If the Russians ever came to Texas, we'd show them a thing or two. And they probably would, because the truth is people don't like being occupied. It's really hard. It's really hard when you work with illegitimate governments that you put in place that aren't seen as legitimate. And it's just really hard to beat people on their home turf, and you shouldn't try. So historically, that's the case. The military likes what it knows, or what it thinks it knows, which is big tank battles in the Fulda Gap against the Russians. I guess now we've moved that east to Ukraine, Poland, and the Baltic. And the Navy and the Air Force, they really like the Pacific. They want to fight in the Taiwan Straits. They like force on force. They don't like or don't realize how bloody our nose is going to get if we try. In either of those scenarios. But the point is, in the Obama administration, Hillary Clinton was a big champion of this. Jake Sullivan, of course, was Hillary Clinton's lapdog for quite some time. I mean, assistant. Hyperhawk, Jake Sullivan. Scary guy to be National Security Advisor. But during the Obama administration, Hillary Clinton was a big champion of the pivot to Asia. And the pivot to Asia is this idea that the real enemy is China. The real problem is great power competition. Russia got back on the radar in a big way because of Trump and just everything that was going on with that, some of which I think was overblown. But because of Russia's notion that there was a Trump-Russia complicity, you know, they're back in a big way, and the Ukraine and all this. So, but one of the results of a pivot to Asia is not just that you can't win a nuclear war against either Russia or China. The human race can't survive one. And not just that, it would actually be really, really hard to win. And America's probably not ready for 500 sailors to go to the bottom of the sea when a missile, right, a land to sea missile hits one of them, you know, an area denial missile. But it forces, they think in Washington, these are the pragmatists, mind you. These are the liberal interventionists who are saying this, as well as the conservatives, but you know, they're dead to me. What they're saying is that in order to beat China, we have to put a coalition together in Southeast Asia and throughout Asia. And that means we need to ally ourselves with anybody who's contesting an island against China. Now, it's called the South China Sea. So it makes me think it's probably close to China, and it turns out it is. And one wonders how the United States would handle another country, be it Russia or China, having the temerity suggest that not only should they have naval parity, but they should have naval supremacy in perpetuity in a sea named after that country, in the Caribbean, in other words, in Boston Harbor, essentially. Now, this doesn't excuse every Chinese action. This doesn't excuse the actions of their government. It doesn't excuse even some of their somewhat aggressive behavior in the islands that are contested in, say, the South China Sea. But the point is, people like Duterte, right? People who are nefarious actors, who are seen as necessary allies, get empowered. And this really, really works out for the realists in Washington who say that we have to pivot to Asia. But it also really works out for the war industry because it opens the spigot up. I mean, we love to open the spigot of our war industry spending, military industrial complex blood money, to countries that are seen as necessary evils, necessary allies against a worse enemy. That's how we get, you know, the essentially ISIS-like government of Saudi Arabia buying Patriot missile systems in perpetuity from the United States. And we have a string of allies. You show me a Cold War type enemy, and I'll show you, you know, dastardly dudes, and they're usually dudes, but not always, that we're supporting in a ring around them. I mean, you could draw a semicircle around the country, and I'll just point out the countries where we're fueling these people. So I think it's an important question. I droned on a little bit there because I think it's key, because I said that one thing is going to happen, I think, I hope I'm wrong, in the aftermath of Afghanistan, to the extent that it's an aftermath, is that this will do these low-level wars as an abstraction, invisible, via proxy and tech-savvy solutions in places like Africa and the Middle East. But I think we're also going to genuinely pivot, and that's seen as a positive even among liberal interventionists in the Democratic Party. That's seen as the smart move, but the action, of course, for the people of the Philippines and other locales in the ring surrounding Russia and the ring surrounding China is that this will go on. And of course, it will fuel those suburbs in Northern Virginia. So I think that there has to be a broader action against the budget, against foreign aid sales, foreign military funding. So not only for our own obscene budget that grows like the universe, meaning forever, and I don't understand how that works, as not a scientist, still don't get it, but the budget is just like that, the military budget at least. And also we have to take a hard look at the funding, the direct sales as well as the foreign military funding. A lot of this is cloaked in the budget lines in ways that it doesn't seem like it's part of our defense budget, but of course it is. So it's a long but hopefully helpful answer.
I want to add one thing to that, because it was back about 10, 15 years ago, the military discovered that if they gave their weapons away, they could get new ones. They could buy new ones. So what happened? We have police departments now with tanks, police departments with these big, fully armored cars, police departments with camouflage and flak jackets, so that our police departments look like the military. It didn't happen by chance. It happened because the military discovered they could buy new things. And then we end up with police departments that are militarized, and then we end up with situations of confrontation. So I just wanted to add that one little piece.
And it's after I read the story of Imad Mugniya, who was the mastermind behind the Beirut bombing in 1983, and how it took our government 25 years to kill him by using a car bomb in Damascus, Syria in 2008, I started wondering how many other people, it's hard for me to read this a little bit on the chat, we kill for various offenses against our rulers. Would either of our speakers know how extensive our hunt down and kill operations are?
Well, I mean, I guess I'll field it as the, you know, as the military vet. I don't have any specific expertise at high level intelligence on how many folks are on our kill lists. We have those. That's fascinating. I mean, during the Obama administration, there were Terror Tuesdays, right? Where they would go down the kill list. The beacon of democracy, the indispensable nation, the last best hope for freedom has a kill list. Baseball cards, which are perfect because you can put them right on a PowerPoint slide. And that's some colonel's job in the Pentagon all day, right? That's fascinating. What it tells us is that there's a broad list. It's not that hard to get on it. That reporting has been done. It does not take that much corroboration to become a target for assassination by the US government. In this specific case, that Beirut bomb is pretty interesting. A couple of, I don't want to say necessarily lies, but sort of, a lot of dissembling has gone on surrounding that. A lot of times it's been acted as though Hezbollah is the is the A squad. And actually, they're more dangerous than Al-Qaeda because, well, look at the first suicide bombings. Well, not the first, but the first that we paid attention to. In Lebanon, the Marine barracks, 241 killed. The embassy bombings, the French embassy, the American embassy. And everyone says it was Hezbollah. Well, it's complicated because Hezbollah didn't really exist yet. It's just forming. There are a lot of different sort of elements that didn't like the American presence. Iran is blamed by saying it was Hezbollah that did it. Because if as we assume, Hezbollah is just an arm of the Iranian government, it's not. It's more complicated than that. These are Lebanese Shia with legitimate grievances against invading Israel, repeatedly invading Israel, and against an invading United States that called it peacekeeping. Well, when peacekeepers start shelling automobile-sized artillery shells from offshore battleships into the hills, into villages, there's legitimate grievances there. So while I'm not in favor of the Beirut bombing, it's interesting how that was twisted to turn Iran into part of the axis of evil. Even 20 years after the 1983 bombing, which really happened the year I was born, and I'm 38. So all that to say that the reach of Uncle Sam, not only of our technology, but of our vengeance and the reach of our memory is long. And in some cases, the political situation changes in such a way that it becomes viable to kill some of these folks when the country that maybe they were being held in, they had some safe haven in, becomes a battleground. And when it becomes a battleground, those targets, they open up again. But I think I would just hone in. I really liked what Nancy had to say about introducing herself as, you know, from a country that, you know, has more people in prison, you know, wages these endless wars, but also has a kill list, has Terror Tuesday meetings with baseball cards. People can be assassinated. And in some cases, Anwar al-Awlaki, American citizens, without any viable due process that's at least transparent. So I hope that's somewhat of an answer to, I think, a complicated question that I'm not necessarily privy to the full answer to.
Of the prisoners held at Guantanamo, what countries are they citizens of? Are they willing to have them repatriated? Are their families able to be in touch with them? And what legal statute allows the U.S. to hold men without charging them?
Let me start at the end. No legal statute allows us to hold them without charge. This is totally illegal, totally illegal. Everything about Guantanamo is illegal. So that's the first thing. As it stands now, many of them are Yemeni. And once again, President Obama, who said he wanted to close Guantanamo, when a man flew over near Detroit, if you recall, a Nigerian man on Christmas Eve and tried to light his underwear on fire on the airplane. It turns out he was Nigerian, but the man who trained him was a Yemeni American, an American citizen who lived in Yemen and was also Yemeni. And we believe, or the government believes, that he was the one who trained him. They may well be right. But so what did Obama do? No Yemenis go home. At the end of story. No, I mean, so that put a lot of people still in Guantanamo, and many of them now are Yemeni. Well, then after that, Saudi Arabia has a reintegration unit. It's kind of a prison, kind of not. I've been there. They've done a really good job of getting people back with their families, and they offered to build one in Yemen. Well, instead, they decided to bomb Yemen, as we know. But the Yemenis now can't go back to Yemen. There is not, it's a disaster, and it was a beautiful place. I was in Sanaa in 2009. It was a gorgeous city that they've wrecked, and all these people have died. But there are, for example, I know there are a couple Yemeni families who said, we have the means to move to Qatar or Bahrain and take him with us if you'll just let him out. But for most of them, they're going to have to find other countries. And that's what people have done, sometimes well and sometimes not so well. Some of them have fared better than others. But we've got to have an organization that does that. We had one, and under Obama, finally, toward the end, Biden has done nothing about starting that. But the Yemenis, I think, now are the real problem. All the Europeans have gone home. The Saudis have gone home. The Kuwaitis have gone home. It's mostly Yemenis. There's some Russians. All the Uyghurs, Chinese Uyghurs are gone finally. And it's that's where we are. But don't think for a minute that there's anything legal about this process. It isn't legal. And when we talk about the kill list, we've got to remember that when one person gets killed on the kill list, usually people are surrounded by other people. And the Obama administration took the position that any man between 18 and 35 was probably equally guilty if he was by the person who they were targeting. And so that didn't count as civilian deaths, and we didn't count them as civilian deaths.
Do you have connections now to Staten Island? We are from Peace Action of Staten Island, and noticed a shift in public opinion against the war, eventually starting after Hurricane Katrina. Did you see that shift also? Curious about your observation.
I still have pretty strong ties to Staten Island. I see family there, friends. You know, Staten Island's a strange place, obviously. I mean, it votes for Trump in like remarkably high numbers. It has like these COVID riots that go on at restaurants. I mean, it's absurd, but it's not a simple borough either. I think sometimes it gets painted with a brush that it's all one thing. It's not really a monolith. And I have seen some changes, some sort of, you know, what used to only happen in certain areas of the North Shore in terms of activism did spread a little further south. But remember that, you know, this is a borough where the Staten Island Expressway, which really divides the island between the northern third and the southern 2/3, has been called the Mason-Dixon line. I mean, it is a very segregated place. My academic work covers that on a civil rights perspective. But I have seen some rumblings of change. In some ways, parts of Staten Island, particularly the southern half, I would say at this point, is almost like a time capsule to 2001. It's September 12th forever. And part of that is the number of cops and firemen there. Part of that is the political conservatism and the social conservatism, at least on some issues, that goes on. So I have not been very involved with local peace activism there, although I've written about civil rights and the Staten Island Advance, to which I received more hate mail than anything I ever wrote about the war, fascinatingly enough. But I don't just lampoon the island either. I take it seriously. And it is interesting that it would have to do with Hurricane Katrina. I'm from Midland Beach, so, you know, we were wiped out. I mean, the bungalows that I, you know, grew up in, my grandparents' bungalow, my uncles, they were just underwater. And if there was a shift, I think some of it might have had to do with the failed response of government to a certain extent, or the perception of that. It's complicated, obviously, although I think largely there's some truth in it. And then where's the money going? But there is still, especially in the really white parts of that borough, and I think this probably speaks to a lot of America, by the way, not just Staten Island, not just parts of New York City. There's a profound militarism, like paramilitarism, that goes on. One of my uncles used to say, and he was half joking, that, you know, oh, it's big deal, you're going to West Point, big deal, you've been to Iraq and Afghanistan, I'm fighting the war that never ends against fire. You know, and it's funny, right? And that's true, and I'd rather we fight fires than you know, foreigners didn't ask for it, whatever a foreigner even means, but whatever. But I did notice that there remains like a certain militarism there, although both demographically and to some extent politically and socially, I think that there too, there's profound change coming, and I think that there are some rumblings of it. I was actually just about finished typing a direct message to you to shoot me a line at my email, which I'll finish up here, because I'm definitely interested in learning more about Staten Island Peace Action and maybe getting involved a bit, because I'm home a whole lot for either activist events or just family. So thanks for that question.
I want to sort of second what Bruce is saying, and just thanking you for talking with us this evening, and really thanking you for the wonderful work that you do. And it's the type of work that you do that I think inspires everybody. You know, watching today, I don't know if anybody saw this today, but as some Democrats and Republicans are lambasting the administration for withdrawing from Afghanistan. I think I saw Menendez, you know, he's in a rage. But I mean, you expect Republicans to do it, but the Democrats are really making a huge fuss about leaving Afghanistan. Many of them are. And it's really a reminder of how important it is for us to build the peace movement and to create momentum for more diplomacy instead of war. Because the reality is that this withdrawal, sadly enough, has actually emboldened the hawks in both political parties. So the importance of our work, I think, is, if anything, through these last weeks really underscored. Now, in the chat, you'll find a flyer that we've produced about Afghanistan, and I hope you'll download it and share it widely. It's also important to call your member of Congress and senators, asking them to cut the military budget, to participate in international efforts to provide the Afghan people with food, healthcare, and jobs, and to maximize the admission of Afghan refugees who are seeking asylum here in the United States. I mean, one of the absolute absurdities, I just glimpsed this in the newspaper today, one of the absolute absurdities is that as members of Congress who are so upset about what's happened to the poor Afghans that they want to make absolutely sure that the administration doesn't give any assistance up to the Taliban of any kind. So our help will be to starve more people in Afghanistan as a response to what's happened. I mean, it's actually really appalling. I want to say one more thing about calling members of Congress or doing protests. That can sound kind of lame, and I feel like, we do this year in and year out. But I think one thing has changed that's really important, which is that right here in Brooklyn, we have two of the most powerful members of Congress as our dear neighbors. And that being Senator Schumer and Representative Jeffries, who's hoping to become Speaker of the House of Representatives. So these are not just your random members of Congress. These are very powerful people. And these are not people who are known for their love of peace, right? So that there's enormous need here to build that pressure.